This next lesson I want to talk about fractions, decimals, and percents and how they are all interrelated. It's easiest to go from decimals to percents, but I wanted to just go over a few basic fractions with that so that you can have a basic understanding of what 1/4 is as a percent so that we can begin to compare fractions. Okay, the first thing, and I have my students do this all the time, is when we look at these fractions, we want to get them to decimals because it's super easy to make into a decimal once we have into a percent, once we have a decimal. So let's look at 1/2 first of all. If I do 1/2 on a calculator, I am going to get 0.50. Okay, 0.50. Now that's 1/2 out of 1. Okay, that's just out of 1. Percent literally means out of 100. So if I have 1 and I want to make it out of 100, I just times that by 100. So I get 0.50 and I times that by 100. Okay? An easy way to do this is remembering back to our multiplication patterns. When we have decimals, times by 100, we move the decimal place because there are 2 zeros. We move the decimal place to the right. We want a bigger number 2 times. So 1/2 equals 0.50 turned into a percent equals 50%. Okay. 50%. Okay. And then 2/2, 2 divided by 2 is one whole number. If you get one whole, we are talking about 100% of the pie. So anytime you have one whole number, we're talking 100%. Okay. And so we now look at thirds. Okay. Most basic one, halves. Thirds, fourths, fifths, and tenths, next most basic. I'll also give you the hint for sixths and eighths. But we look at 3/3. We're talking about the whole shebang. So that is still 100%. 4 divided by 4 equals one whole. So we're talking about 100%. So as we look at thirds, thirds are a little bit tricky simply because it's not exactly even. When you divide 1 divided by 3, you get 0.33 repeating on forever. It'll be 3's as long as your calculator can take you, as long as you dare write it for weeks on end if you wanted to. 3's continue on forever. So this line above the decimal, above the numbers, say those are repeating. So I times it by 100 and I get 33, and those 3's, since they're repeating, we're talking about 33.33%. Okay, 33.33 forever percent. That equals 1/3. So if I make 1 out of 3 baskets, that's 33.33%, or you can say approximately 33%. Now, if I have 1/3 of a pie, I must be hungry. I'm thinking pies and cookies a lot. If I have 1/3, I know that because it's a fraction, every single piece is even. So I have 1/3 that's at 33.33%, and I have another piece that's at 33.33%. And if I want to look 2/3, I just do 1/3 plus 1/3 to equal 2/3. So 33.33 plus 33.33, and I get 66.66 forever repeated percent. A lot of times, people will just round this off and say 66.67%. That's okay. I am okay with that. I just want them to know, my students, and you to know, that it is actually 66.66%. 3/3, 100%. Okay, now we look at our equivalent fractions. 2/4, automatically I know, hey, 2/4, that's the exact same as 1/2. So that is going to be 50%. Equivalent fractions, 1/2, 2/4, 3/6, 4/8, 5/10, 50%, because they all equal 1/2. Okay, well if I have 2/4, what's half of 2/4? Just 1. So if I do that on the calculator, I get 0.25. So I times that by 100, I move the decimal place twice, and I get 25%. Now if I'm counting by 25%, quarters, you can think of that as cents, things like that. 1/4 is 25, 2/4 is 50, 3/4 is 75. Okay, 75 out of 100, 75%. So every time we're talking quarters, we're talking about 25% of the whole. Fifths, I take 100 divided by 5. Okay. That's just another way you can find how much is 1/5. 1/5 equals 20%. Because 10 divided by 5 is 2, so 100 divided by 5 equals 20. So 1/5 is 20%. If I have 2/5, I'm just doubling that 20%. Oh, 1/5 plus 1/5, 20 plus 20 is 40%. And so on, like that. Tenths, pretty easy. What's a tenth of a dollar? A dime. How much is a dime? 10 cents. 1/10, 1 divided by 10, you get the decimal 0.10. Times that by 100, you get 10%. So, for each tenth, 4 tenths, 4 times 10, 40%. 7 tenths, 70%. 8 tenths, 80. 9 tenths, 90%. And so on. Okay, really quickly. Sixths. Sixths are exactly half of thirds. So, 1/6, and I want you to be able to see this, 1/6 equals 16.66%. 2/6 equals 33.33. 3/6 is 50%, of course. 4/6 equals 2/3. So you're at 66.66 repeated percent. 5/6 is 83.33%. So you make 5 out of 6 buckets. You're shooting 83.33%. Okay. Then the last one, eighths. Eighths are half of fourths. So if 1/4 is 25%, 1/8 is half of that. Half of 25% is 12.5%. Okay. So 2/8 equals 1/4. 3/8 equals 2/8 plus 1/8. So 3/8 equals 37.5%. Next, 5/8 is just 4/8 plus 1/8. 2/4 or 1/2 equals, or 4/8 equals 50%, plus 12.5, so you have 62.5%. Then 3/4, 75%, or 6/8, same thing. And 7/8 is just 75 plus 12.5 equals 87.5%. In real life, I use halves, thirds, fourths, fifths, and tenths almost daily. But maybe that's just how my brain works. But it's useful to understand fractions, decimals, percents, and their relationship.